using exercises rather than on the higher practices of meditation. The purpose is to prepare the body for meditation. So it all leads to the same places any other yoga practice does. But it also gets really deep into not just the physiology of it, but the energy of it and the philosophical reasons behind it all. Right, so we usually start out with just a few minutes, just to quiet meditation, just to ground ourselves down, but also to use this meditation as a comparison. So if you keep coming on a regular basis, the idea behind doing these practices is that they will prepare the body for meditation. So you might notice when you first start coming, sitting for even a minute is really difficult, and then hopefully after several months of coming, maybe practicing on your own, you'll find that your meditation starts to become a little bit easier. So just honing our skills of observation. So be comfortable however you want to sit, even if you want to lie down or sit up against the wall. If you have those back jacks, you can kind of just lean right back into them. Close your eyes. Just take a few moments to get your body situated. So however you need to wiggle, or if you feel like you need to roll your neck or wiggle your jaw from side to side, or rock on your sitting bones, whatever it is, make those little movements to shake out that surface tension and let you find some stillness in your seat. Feel the earth underneath you, nice and solid, supporting you. Feel the base of the body is heavy, sinking into the earth like you're growing roots. And then like a tree, imagine those roots go down, but the trunk of the body goes up. Reaching through the crown of the head, finding length up and down, all vertically along your spine. Just let your breath be natural, so no ujjayi, no special method to it. Just let it be natural. Imagine your breath breathing you. Choose one point, it doesn't matter what it is. Typical points are the point between your eyebrows or the tip of your nose or the center of your chest, but it could be anywhere. Or you can use an image, be an image of a flower or a favorite teacher, some sort of symbol that uplifts you. Or you can use a mantra if you have one, or sound of Om, for example. Just choose one thing that you're going to focus on for the next few minutes. And the whole exercise is simply to keep your focus on your object of choice. So lots of things are going to arise to interfere with that. Your mind thoughts are going to come. The desire to move your body, your physical body might come. Emotions might arise. Whatever they are, you're going to treat them all the same way. It's like bubbles boiling to the surface. You're going to watch them bubble up and then let them pop. Let them go and come back to whatever your chosen point of focus is. You're just going to do that again and again and again, just for a few moments. Chant sheet. We have gotten up to verse 11. We are just hopping right along. So, Jess has lovely numbered them for us. So, you pronounce these pretty much every word that it says, or every letter, and if it has an accent over it, just means it's a little bit longer. And I studied Sanskrit, but I'm no Sanskrit scholar, so I stumbled through it too, and that's perfectly fine. So I'll break it down a little bit, and then I'll do a word or a phrase, and you repeat after me, and we'll go back and forth like that. Hatha, Hatha, Vidya, Vidya, Param, Param, Gopya, Gopya, Yogina, Yogina, Siddhi Michchatta, Siddhi Michchatta, Bhaved, Bhaved, Viryavati, Viryavati, Gupta, Gupta, Nirvirya, Nirvirya, Tu Prakashita, Tu Prakashita, Hatha Vidya, Hatha Vidya, Param Gopya, Param Gopya, Yogina Siddhi Michchatta, Yogina Siddhi Michchatta, Bhaved Viryavati, Bhaved Viryavati, Gupta Nirvirya, Gupta Nirvirya, Tu Prakashita, Tu Prakashita, Hatha Vidya Param Gopya Yogina Siddhi Michchatta, Hatha Vidya Param Gopya Yogina Siddhi Michchatta, Bhaved Viryavati Gupta Nirvirya Tu Prakashita, Bhaved Viryavati Gupta Nirvirya Tu Prakashita, Hatha Vidya Param Gopya Yogina Siddhi Michchatta, Bhaved Viryavati Gupta Nirvirya Tu Prakashita, Hatha Vidya Param Gopya Yogina Siddhi Michchatta, Bhaved Viryavati Gupta Nirvirya Tu Prakashita. Great, and once more together. Hatha Vidya Param Gopya Yogina Siddhi Michchatta, much easier than last week. If you look up at number 10, you see how long the verse were. So we've been using two different translations just so we can get a little comparison of what the verses are. So it's like the Yoga Sutras, which Jeff can watch that. It's a very terse verse, and then it's up to us to unfold what's inside of it with talking about it, contemplating it, meditating on it, reading the commentary. So this translation is, a yogi desirous of success should keep the knowledge of Hatha Yoga secret, for it becomes potent by concealing and impotent by exposing. This translation. Hatha Yoga is the greatest secret of the yogis who wish to attain perfection, which they call siddhi in Sanskrit. Indeed, to be fruitful, it must be kept secret. Revealed, it becomes powerless. Fairly similar translation. So read to you a little bit from the commentary. This sloka is a verse. This sloka is typical of any yogic shastra expounding higher knowledge. That is to say, the science should be kept to oneself. Whatever a sadhaka gains or achieves during the period of sadhana should be a private affair. So that word siddhi that I just said, which there in parentheses is meaning to attain perfection, we talked about in previous weeks. It's back farther in the book. And these are these superpowers that arise as a result of the yoga practice. So things like being able to make yourself gigantic, like the size of the universe. Maybe we talked about, well, does that really mean, physically, or does it mean you can expand your consciousness that far? But regardless of what it means, that's one of the cities. Another one is things like you would be able to walk through a wall, or you'd be able to become extraordinarily heavy, or breathe underwater, I think was one of them. So, they're like superhuman, superhero powers. But it's not the end goal of the practice. They're just byproducts of what happens when we do the practice. And then we're meant to move beyond them. So it's another challenge not to get attached to them, because how exciting it must be to be able to do something like fly, for example. But we ultimately have to let go of those. They're just training wheels and tools to bring us to higher levels. So speaking about them is it will keep us back from moving ahead. So if all of a sudden you can fly, right? If you run around and you tell everybody you can fly, it's going to keep you in the flying phase, or it might even drag you backwards out of the flying phase so that you can't fly anymore. So the idea, because of things that we create, right? We then immediately we've created an attachment to the power, right? The minute you tell somebody, why would you tell somebody that you've attained such a power? It could only serve to self-flattery, right? So that's obviously not going to help us along the spiritual path. The spiritual path is about cutting all of those things out. We talked about Parigraha as the focus of the month in the Kumbha classes this month. So greedlessness is how that's translated, but Jess said it really well in her class today. It's not so much about not hoarding things, it's about not holding on to anything, including our ideas about things, or our judgments about things, or how great our yoga practice has become, right? Nothing, and it's a lifelong practice, like the practice of ahimsa, nonviolence. You start with it in a very, very gross level. Sure, I don't punch people, but how subtle can you get? Maybe you become a vegetarian, then maybe you become vegan, maybe all sorts of different levels it can go to. So the same thing with the greedlessness. Like, okay, maybe at first that means I don't own 100 pairs of shoes. I give them away to charity to maybe somebody who doesn't have shoes. But it gets subtler and subtler until we're starting to let go of things like our habits, our subtle thoughts that keep us anchored into the physical world, rather than letting our spirits fly a little sometimes.
Is it saying that you shouldn't tell people that you gave away the shoes?
No, that's to do with the aparigraha,
Right.
but that too.
Yeah.
You know, that
I
is.
mean, as far, yeah.
That's
I guess
too.
it depends on how you push it.
Why would you tell somebody?
That you gave away the shoes.
Mhm.
Maybe if they wanted to borrow them, the pair that you gave away.
It's like any yoga practice, it's the intention behind
Right.
what goes on. So if your intention is to say, look at how wonderful I am, I'm becoming greedless,
Right.
then you've sort of defeated the action's sort of been defeated a little bit. So it's like to keep it quiet. It's like a form of charity. You know, you don't run around and tell everybody, you know, oh, I just, you know. Like,
So those random acts of
Yeah.
kindness,
Right,
you don't get
exactly.
credit for.
Exactly. And it's really hard not to tell people about it for a lot of reasons, sometimes simply because we're so excited about it. And maybe that's
Right, yeah.
and maybe that's an okay reason to tell
Yeah.
somebody about it, because you want them to be enthusiastic about it, or you want to share your joy about it.
Right.
You know, and then that's a different story than, you know, aggrandizing
Yeah, but
yourself.
that could be dangerous too, because it depends on who you're telling that to, because they could use that against you somehow, or maybe diminish or make it seem smaller.
Well, that's part of the reason behind
Right,
not,
yes.
not discussing your spiritual practices. It's
Right.
there are many different ways it can be diminished. Really, it's an energetic thing. Like
Right.
you build up an energy with all of these practices, and say through a good work, you've created this certain, like a ball of energy, right? If you tell somebody, it sort of dissipates the density of that energy. So it's really you're the only one who's going to be affected in the end by it. So you want to like keep all that energy in and let it build up. And then also this not speaking, you know, this helps us to purify our speech as well, purify our thoughts. So many purposes to it. And you'll notice the Autobiography of a Yogi is a really popular book. It's a great book to get people introduced into yoga when you're new to yoga. And it's kind of going out on a limb and doing the opposite of this. Is, you know, Paramahansa Yogananda is telling all of the crazy things that his master used to do when in states of meditation. And normally masters don't talk about this, they don't share it. So there must have been some purpose behind him sharing it. And we talked a little bit in past weeks about first coming to the practice with the tiniest bit of faith. You know, this isn't a religion, it's a philosophy and a life practice. But to walk into a room, especially when you're a beginner, and to have somebody say, oh, you can reach enlightenment by doing this, you're like, what? You know? So you have to have a tiny bit of faith in the beginning until you start to have your own experiences. And then once you have your own very first experience, you can let go of the faith, because then you're basing it on your own internal experiences. So I think that things like Autobiography of a Yogi, when the masters do, they do sometimes do demonstrations of how they can hold their breath for an hour or stop their pulse and then their heartbeats. You know, it's to show us this is real. You know, we aren't just teaching you these things like, oh, you can fly. It's like, I've done this before. One of the ones in the Autobiography of a Yogi is he's in two places at one time. There's like two documentations of this person being in two places at one time. So it's to just, you know, give us that little bit of proof, if you will, that it can be done, that it is real and attainable.
I don't want to practice this and hold my experiences, but if you get a chance to go to the lake shrine in Los Angeles, I really recommend it. Anybody does his lake shrine?
What is it?
Yogananda's, it's where he set up a shrine there, and it's a lake, and it's pretty magical. It's cool, amazing. So
In LA?
it's in LA, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I don't want to put you off from discussing your
Oh, no.
experiences too, if you feel so compelled to do so. You know, especially as a beginner, you might have questions or, you know, be confused about what it is, or just be so exuberant that you want to share it.
I was actually going to ask that, Laura, too, about like, so with this practice, like the idea of teaching, so teaching is your intention. If you're a yoga teacher, if you're sharing the practice in an environment like this, is that something different because of the intention behind it? Or
Is
would
it something different than that?
Then what this number 11? So what they're talking about keeping the knowledge internal.
No, they're not talking about this. This is meant to be shared. This is here. Here's the
Right.
guidebook to yoga. Take it and do it. No, they're talking about like personal accomplishments. Like, you know, when you attain higher levels. You know, like if you, I keep saying flying or, you know, whatever it is. Like if you've ever lucid dreamed before, you know, it's so exciting to be able to lucid dream. But when you start to, well, lucid dreaming is a little bit different. When you start to talk about it, maybe it happens less, you know, or then it's harder for you to do. It's just kind of, it's just builds something up inside of you. It builds up a momentum or an energy. And if you're sharing it too much, you know, then even through your words, like the energy is being dissipated. So we're trying to build up energy inside of us and move the energy up through the chakras. So, you know, this is a method to let that continue its trajectories, to keep it, to internalize it.
I had the same concern with like teaching, and the more that you learn, the more you can teach. And then I'm like, gosh, now I'm telling like all these neat things about Hatha yoga to like everybody, and so then I was thinking maybe that's what it's saying. But I see what you're saying now. You're talking about the personal practice.
Experiences.
Yeah.
I feel like teaching yoga is part of my spiritual practice. Like I feel like that's where I get a lot of those experiences even happen.
Yeah.
It makes me
Yeah.
reflect more deeply on
Yeah.
different things, and then also seeing like students kind of go through their own self-discoveries, even like the look on people's faces sometimes when they get something. It's just like, it's really cool. And so then I was like, oh no, I don't want to not do that because the book tells me not to.
I mean, it's talking about cities. There's a difference between cities and, you know,
Teaching.
I had a heart opening in Kirtan.
Uh-huh.
You know, like, a heart opening is like, cool, wow, my gosh, I'm growing, this is good, you know, but, you know, and it is, you know, a lower level of the same thing, but a city, like a superpower. It's like, you don't want to go around and tell everybody that you can fly, right? or it's, imagine even just the ramifications of doing that would be, you know, then all of a sudden everyone wants to see you fly, or prove it, right? And so there's a lot of reasons not to, but the main reason is because you want to internalize all of the energy.
Well, when teachers demonstrate seemingly impossible poses to me, it's in a way quite an inspiration though to see. And most of us, I think most students can tell ego when they versus inspiration.
Yeah, there's this, again, they're talking about something very specific, you know. The intention generally behind doing a pose is so that people can see what it's supposed to look like or to inspire them. Yeah, it's different. Yeah.
And this is all about deflation of ego or whatever.
This is specifically about superpowers, about attaining superpowers. Is when that happens, keep it to yourself.
Okay. And that's the ego part of it,
Partly.
And partly so people don't think you're really strange.
Mostly it's energetic, because it means you've attained built up a certain amount of energy at that point, and if you talk about it, it's going to dissipate that energy, so it's going to slow down your spiritual progress.
So like mojo or something.
Yes. Yes. I like that.
So if you can fly, should you not fly in front of people? Or is it-
Yes, definitely not.
Make yourself invisible first. And
Right,
then
yes. Fly with God first. It's interesting what comes back, like what it is you pick up on versus not. When you have a small light burning in a room at night, the whole room is illumined. If you take your little light outside into the vast open space, the light is engulfed by the night and absorbed in the darkness. The same principle applies to the power gained through your sadhana. Sadhana is your spiritual practice. The power may enlighten your own consciousness, but displayed and dissipated in the magnitude of the outside world, it loses strength. It's much more eloquent than what I'm trying to say. I just started reading this book that Macy talked about in one of the past classes. Anastasia. Have you read this book? It's really weird, but really interesting. It's it's set in Russia. It's supposedly a true story about this man on an expedition who meets this woman who lives in taiga in the forest. And for generations, her family has lived there, but they all live alone. They become recluses, and they don't wear clothes, and any food that they need, like squirrels bring to them. They don't feel cold, and they can interact with animals. And so apparently this goes on there. And so for some reason, I haven't gotten to the reason yet, they wanted this man to come deep into this place. So this woman in particular went and got him and brought him back to 25 miles into the taiga, and proceeded to show him all of her superpowers, which to her were just normal because she'd been living her whole life honing them and communing them. Like, she learned how to control her mind and to tap into universal consciousness. And so she was trying to show him that it's real and that anybody can do it with practice. But he was so far removed from anything like that he just thought she was completely insane, and he was totally confused by what she was saying and doing and couldn't make any sense out of it. So, and she was becoming frustrated, I guess, trying to bring him in to do what it was she wanted him to do, because she couldn't communicate on the same level. She couldn't communicate down enough to him. So sometimes it's too much. She showed him too much, and then he wasn't able to carry out the role she needed him to, which I think in the end he does, but something like that. Sadhana is like a seed, and siddhis, these superpowers, are like flowers. So sadhana, your spiritual practice, is like a seed, and the superpowers are like flowers. If you want a seed to germinate, you have to leave it in the soil. If you dig it up to show your friends and neighbors how it is progressing, it will not grow any further. It will die. Likewise, the siddhi is just at the germinating point of your sadhana. If you are trying to cultivate fully bloomed awareness of Atma, which is your individual soul, you will have to act properly. Sadhana is not a biology lesson where you dig up the plant to investigate its roots. Sadhana involves the growth of your own spirit, and it is like the process of giving birth. When a fetus is growing in the womb, we cannot peep into the intermediate stage of its development. We have to wait for the final product. So again, both of those metaphors are so much more effective than what I'm trying to say. The light and the darkness, or three metaphors: the seed and the flowers, the child and the womb. Does that make more sense? It's easier to talk in metaphor sometimes with spiritual practice. Keeping sadhana and siddhis under cover has a powerful psychological effect. If you talk about and display your attainments, the sense of I or ego becomes very acute, like you were saying. I have achieved. I had this experience, or I can do this. If you want to experience cosmic consciousness, ego or ahamkara is the greatest barrier. Actually, Macy mentioned this in her Kumba class yesterday, talking about greedlessness, was I. How many times, do you say the word I over the course of a day? This was one of the first awakenings I ever had. Was my mother said to me when I was, I don't know, maybe 12, 13 years old. I must have just been driving her crazy. And my mother is not a person who gets angry or anything like that. And she just turned around and said, I want you to count how many times you said the word I in the last half hour. And I was like, and that was the first moment of awakening of consciousness. Yeah, we're growing up, becoming adult. It was, wow.
Yeah.
I'm totally self-consumed.
And try to write something. Try to describe something that you did and write. Because I journal a lot. And writing Try to say it without using it's really hard.
Yeah, very. So it's a great practice in in letting go, in greedlessness, letting go of your own ego, and just like you pointed out, Chiz, that's part of the reason for not sharing your superpowers also. Cities never last long. They are impermanent. After a certain stage of evolution, they disappear. So just like flowers, right? Everything's so beautiful in the spring, the flowers come out, and within days they're gone, and then they turn just to green leaves and carry on the business of growing, right? Rather than the, oh, here we are. Most of the great saints and siddhas who had powers rarely displayed them. Only the people who lived very close to them knew their greatness. Many siddhas who did display their powers were persecuted, for example, Christ. Therefore, for your own good and for the good of others, it is said, as a warning rather than mere advice, that sadhana and siddhis are to be kept secret. So it's really interesting to use the example of Jesus in that, he was a living example of somebody who attained superpowers through deep spiritual practice. Now the miracles talked about, that really happened, but look what happened from sharing that. So this is a great example of why not to. So, any other questions or comments or thoughts about that?
Yogananda has a book called Yoga of Jesus.
He does a lot of comparison of Christianity and Jesus. It's really beautiful. He sees it so in depth. None of these things contradict each other. I volunteer. I volunteer on Friday mornings at the Good Shepherd, and it's a Christian organization, and they don't do a lot of overt praying or anything like that, or talk about it, but they know, I've been there for over a year now, and they know that I teach yoga, and I'm actually an ordained minister, and I've led 2 weddings before, and I can see their shackles getting up, like thinking, what church are you ordained in, and how did you get that? And I'm just totally, I got it online, and anybody can get it, and you just vow to be
Ordained, that's funny, because I do meditations and use the I Ching every morning. This morning, ordained came up, and I was like, dang, and I had to look it up, the definition of what it is. And it comes from Buddhism, actually, from what I read about it. And it's what you're spiritually supposed to be doing. It's almost like your dharma or something.
Oh, really?
So you're ordained to do that.
I like that a lot. They've been listening, I guess.
Yeah.
And one of them sort of cornered me in front of everybody else and said, yeah, I tried to. They're very interested in it because I'm vegan too. So they're always, when anything vegan comes across, they're all like, here, do you want this? And asking me questions about it. And how can you not eat cheese? And don't you want a hamburger? All the typical vegan questions. And, so they've been drinking up this information. So he turned around and said, so I did yoga for a while, but then I started to feel like it was contrary to my religion, and I started to hear things that made me think I shouldn't do it anymore, and that made me really sad, because it shouldn't in any way contradict any religious or philosophical beliefs from any other walk. The idea behind yoga, the literal translation is union. It's about bringing us all together, not pushing us apart. So anything that pushes apart like that, like fear of contradiction, is, automatically that that's not a part of yoga, because it has the opposite effect. So I did my best to try to explain that to him, but
there are some prejudices that come up with like, not close family, but sort of distant family members about, while you're wasting your time, while you're wasting your money, devil worshipping, or just these So just even non-superpowered yoga
Right.
practice brings some attention that, so.
Yeah.
And that's one of the challenges of being a yoga practitioner and a yoga teacher. We actually had a whole lesson on that during my teacher training. I think it was called something like the pitfalls of being a yoga teacher. And it's like that, like people are going to challenge you. You know, why do you do that? This contradicts my beliefs. And it's just an opportunity for us to go deeper inside to ask ourselves, why do I do this? What do I get out of it? What change has it made in my life? Does it contradict anything that I believe or that you believe?
So you deal with your family.
Yeah, so you deal with people closest to you, yeah.
That's what it's come down to.
Exactly, and then you become, then you embody it, and you, that's really what all these practices are about, is embodying them and moving through our lives as examples of the practices. It's not about me sitting here telling you anything, or you trying to convince other people to come to yoga classes. People say to me all the time, are you always this happy? Why are you so happy? And I'm like, yeah, I'm like this most of the time, and I don't know why I am, other than to say it must be because of what I do. I practiced yoga almost daily, well, some sort of form, even if it's not physical asana, for 25 years now, and 23 years. And I've been vegetarian for 20 years and vegan for 10 years. So, all of these things start to build up, like we were talking with the cities, the superpowers, this energy, starts to build up. Your well-being starts to build up. So, and then that's what shines out to people, and that's what draws people into the practice, not anything that you preach or teach to them. They want that happiness. And they say, what do you do to get it? And I say, this is what I do. And that brings them in. That's what we want to do. By our examples. Okay, I still have time. So let us do another one. I'm excited for that. Sometimes we only make it through one. So number 12, we'll go through it chanting first, like we did before. Surajay,
Surajay,
Dharmike,
Dharmike,
Deshe,
Deshe,
Subikshe,
Subikshe,
Nirupadrave,
Nirapadrave,
Dhanu,
Dhanu,
Ramana,
Ramana,
Paryantam,
Paryantam,
Shilanidya,
Shilanidya,
Lavarjite,
Lavarjite,
Ekante,
Ekante,
Matikamadye,
Matikamadye,
Statavyam,
Satyavyam,
Hatha Yogina,
Hatha Yogina,
Suraje, Dharmike, Deshe, Subikshe, Nirupadrave,
Suraje, Dharmike, Deshe, Subikshe, Nirupadrave,
Dhanu, Ramana, Paryantam, Shilagnityalavatrite,
Dhanu,
Ramana, Paryantam, Shilagnityalavatrite, Ekante, Madhikamadye, Statavyam, Hatha Yogina,
Ekante, Madhikamadye, Statavyam, Hatha Yogina.
Let's do it twice through all together.
Suraje, Dharmike, Deshe, Subikshe, Nirupadrave, Dhanu, Ramana, Paryantam, Shilagnityalavatrite,
Raje Dharmike Deshe Suvishe Nirupadrade Dhanu Ramanam Paryantam Silan Vichalavachate Ekante Mati Kamadye Satavyam Hatha Yogina. We should just chant the whole thing and not study anything.
I know.
It's powerful, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's meant to be. If we chanted this enough, the idea with Sanskrit is that it's so vibrational that the meaning would arise within us without even knowing what the translation is.
What would each of the numbers correspond to different chakras, or do they each sort of
They're the verses.
initiate all
above.
of them?
Mhm.
Oh, go ahead.
The numbers on the
So
of
like
the
if you're,
verses?
you know, like what we were doing, would that correspond to a single chakra, or it's sort of meant to activate all your chakras as
Oh,
you're
the
chanting the
particular
vibration?
chant? I'm not so sure that it's specifically related to a chakra. It's related to whatever the words are that it's saying. Like if we were chanting the word cow, then the feeling of cowness would come up in us eventually. what it means to be a cow, the qualities or the virtues of a cow would come up. So not necessarily meant to stimulate anything, but made to connect us to what the thing is that we're chanting. I like the example of prema. Like if you chant prema long enough, you'll have a heart opening because the word prema means love. So the experience of what the thing is. It's a good question.
Maybe you just chant that.
yeah, the whole world. So land translation. The yogi should practice Hatha Yoga in a small room, situated in a solitary place, being 4 cubits square, and free from stones, fire, water, disturbances of all kinds. And in a country where justice is properly administered, where good people live, and food can be obtained easily and
Chili.
plentifully. So how specific is that? This is great. This is like where the Hatha Yoga Pradipika kicks in. Like the whole book is like this now. It's really super specific about everything. So let's read a little the other translation just to see the difference. The Hatha Yogi should live alone in a hermitage and practice in a place the length of a bow, 1.5 meters, where there is no hazard from rocks, fire, or water, and which is in a well-administered and virtuous kingdom, nation, or town, where good alms can be easily attained. That's a little bit different at the end, where you can, food can be obtained easily and plentifully. So remember the history, the historical context of what's going on here. So these were the Nath yogis broke off from the Vedic traditions, from all the ceremony. They broke off, they went out into the forest, and they started experimenting with their own bodies, different practices to see if they would have any sort of effect on them, because they believed that they could commune directly with the divine, that they didn't need a Brahmin priest to do it, which is what everybody else at that time believed. So they were in the forest. So they were looking for a place in the forest that didn't have rocks, and I've read elsewhere bugs, right? Fire, water. So they're out in the elements. So take that into consideration when you're thinking of contemplating what this verse means. Naturally we don't have the same considerations here, sitting in this air-conditioned room with this bamboo cushion floor and all the rest of it. But they did have those considerations.
Did you say 1.5 meters? That's not very big.
No.
That's like, 4 feet or something?
Yeah, a little bit more than 3, yeah. And then the other one said, what, 4
Cubits.
cubits, whatever that is. Yeah, so.
That's relate to horses, I think. Cubits.
Yeah, so a small, basically a small, clean space free of distraction is
So
what
the,
it's saying.
so the stones doesn't have anything to do with like crystals or anything like that?
No, it just means find a comfortable seat, essentially. I don't know where the one I read about the bugs is.
It's the next verse.
Free of, oh, is it? Okay. So let's read a little bit of why. Here Yogi Swatmarama, who's the one who gives the commentary, has outlined the ideal situation for Hatha Yoga sadhana and the location of the hermitage the sadhaka should establish. The sadhaka is the spiritual practitioner who practices sadhana, the spiritual practices. However, we must remember that in the days of Yogi Swatmarama, the whole structure of society and the way of living were very different from what we see nowadays. It is doubtful whether a truly righteous country still exists today. So few countries allow for the growth of the spirit. With the influence of modern politics, everybody is more interested in making money and gaining power and prestige. It seems India is one of the only countries which has catered for spiritual growth and continued the tradition of giving alms. India is still the home of spiritually hungry and spiritually enlightened souls, and she continues to feed her children. And this is interesting because this is like gives you some background into, yoga did arise out in India, and culturally there was a certain, and there still is, a certain process that a person follows from birth to death related to their spiritual practice. And it makes sense for us to understand what that is. In the tradition of ancient India, a man's life was divided into 4 distinct stages, which were called ashrama. The first ashrama was for the period up to the age of 25, and it was known as brahmacharya ashrama. In this ashrama, the child went to live with a guru, a teacher, in a spiritual community, where he received an education in both worldly and spiritual subjects. Then from the age of 25 to 50, he entered a grihastha ashrama, in which he married and lived a family life. From the age of 50 to 75, he passed through vanaprastha ashrama, where he and his wife left all family ties and lived alone in the forest or jungle, secluded from society. After 75, the two separated and took the life of sannyasa. In sannyasa ashrama, one was free from society and independent of its rules and regulations. However, society took care of the sannyasins and gave them food, clothing, and shelter if it was required. Those people who had a natural inclination to sannyasa at an early age were permitted to leave society if the family agreed, but they were never allowed to re-enter the framework of society again. Maybe this will get into it more, but what are your thoughts on that? Why would that be beneficial or suggested for spiritual practice?
Like the ashrama period, to me, it's establishing a good foundation to support a family type life, and so that it can be passed to the children, and then after that, so the wife and the husband go together into divorce, and then. And to me, it's like when they're in the forest, they're probably reaping the fruits of their labor of a family, because it's pretty hard to raise a family.
They're chilling out after the kids.
Yeah, right. So to speak, I mean, and not like it's, it's like you're in the samadhi type state, and that's pretty chill.
It'd be difficult to do when you're taking care of children.
Yeah. And then the separation is just you're just completely unionizing with the creation, the creator, or the main source to pass into. So when you pass, you're passing directly into it.
So it's kind of a logical progression built on each stage that came before it. What else
Kind of feels like the embodiment of that seed metaphor that you were using in the previous one. You know, that you've got these stages that you germinate and start to grow and experience, and then connect with nature, and then pass and start the cycle again. What do you think?
Yeah, that's great too.
It's like in the first stages, you just like learn enough to start to be able to think about things in relation to other things, and then in the second phase, you start to have experiences to ground that more esoteric information in terms of like what a human experience is like. But then the second two are more about a parigraha. Like one of our students here was saying she practices Jainism, and that's like one of the highest spiritual practices, is that you recognize that, you know, your spirit doesn't like need anything, and the more that you can shed and the more that you can let go, the closer you move towards spiritual enlightenment. And so ultimately you start to detach a little bit, and then have more space to just, well, also it's, I mean, spiritual growth is a solo journey, but you need the interactions to have something to comprehend it all within. But then we have to let go of the attachments.
Yeah, but here it just seems really hard to get to that point of practicing that where you're totally detached, especially in Wilmington.
Wilmington, I'm at the supermarket.
Well, there's,
Yeah.
you know, there's this talk about, you know, becoming a recluse, going to a hermitage. It's in this book, Anastasia, that I'm reading too.
I want to do that sometimes.
You know, yeah, he's questioning now. It's the last chapter I read. Is what is it that happens when people go away into the woods by themselves? Why is this such a universal sort of experience that people come out having revelations? You know, what goes on in there? So you will never know until you go and do it. You know,
And then you, based on number 11, you're not even allowed to tell it.
Right, right, because you're honing it for yourself. It's your spiritual practice. So everything you said, all of you, is yes. What Jess said is kind of what I was looking for, that I've, you know, heard before, being the reasoning behind these practices too, is to get it all out of our system, is to go, like, it's natural when you're young that you want to learn, right? You're very eager to learn. So go, learn, do it. You know, get it out of your system. And then there's the primordial drive to reproduce, right? So do it, go, get married, have kids, you know, and experience it. Experience all there is of life. Then when the, you know, kids go, they're grown up, there's no more need for your attention, then you and your wife, you know, you get deeper with each other. You withdraw from society, and then you work yourselves up to the next level. And then even that, we're creating detachment, right? And even this most beloved person that you traveled through this life journey with, it will not be a drama to leave each other when the time is right. It will be right for both of them. If they're spiritual sadhakas practicing together, then it will be a mutual time when it's right for both of them. It won't be a heartbreak for them to split. It will be joyous moving on into the next phase of their own development.
So, like, for myself, who, you know, like, how would I go through all the phases in this lifetime if I didn't have realization until after I had been married, divorced, and had kids? You know, like, what, you know, and then you realize all these things, and it's like, well, how do I apply that to my life?
We might not make it past there. Just being born into the circumstances anybody is born in is karma. It's like you're picking up where you left off in your past life, and your spiritual progression is through many lifetimes. It's not, you know, in this one lifetime, right? We work on it, and then your next birth puts you in a situation in which you're going to be met with all of the challenges and the lessons. Oh yeah, we're gonna do it again and again. If you don't want to, then you know exactly what you need to do. You need to go to India, and you need to go into the woods, and you need to find a spot with no rocks and fire and bugs. Right? And if you were ready, if you did that, you would achieve. This is what these books.
So it can be done.
It can be done, but do we have the discipline? I've thought to myself
Yeah.
many times,
I-
that's
like,
what
right
I
now
want
I
to
can
do,
put-
but I'm here, I'm
Yeah.
not there.
It's like, yeah, I mean, like, you know, like for me, my progression is that for some reason, you know, the only attachments I had to my immediate family was my father. He passed away, and it's like, and then my other family is just detached, and it's like everything's just falling apart. You know, I have a small boat that I live on, and I can put everything in the back seat of my car. And it's like these things are here and it's there, and to me it's just all happening and it's just falling. And
Maybe it's time for you to sail away.
so yeah.
But make sure you're not sailing away from something.
No, I don't want. I don't even want the boat or the car anymore. Or the stuff in it.
Then let that. I mean, that's beautiful.
And that's not even not wanting. It's just like I just feel caught. You know, it's like, well, where do I go? What do I do? What do you do next? You know?
I start to wonder, I don't know if this is where you're at, but things just seem to keep going away. And I'm like, well, did I hold on for too long? And then everything's going away at once. You know, it's like just family problems and money problems and living space just go away and cars go away and people go away, and it's like, okay, what are you trying to tell me here? You know?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
What can I learn from it? The letting go. Ultimately, like Jess said it in class today, you know, so eloquently, is, you know, she had this whole series of things that we let go of, and you know, ultimately, we die, and we can't bring anything with us. We have to let go of absolutely everything and go back the way we came with absolutely nothing. So, our lifetime is a process of loss, learning how to let go, to not grip onto these things to try to keep them.
Yeah, sometimes I just want to, you know, take my clothes off and walk down the street and be like, I'm starting over, you know, it's like, that's the way I feel like sometimes, you know?
This is with this anesthesia, his clothes were very binding to her.
It's like,
You know? So if that's arising in you, you know, not that you need to go take
Yeah,
your clothes
right.
off, but you know, like the spiritual
Yeah,
yearning, or
spiritually
like
speaking.
the detachments happening, or, you know, go with it, go with it. Maybe that's where this lifetime is leading you, and you're ready to go there.
Also thinking about it though from like an anthropological sense, there's a lot of times where like the mandates of different religions have specific cultural purposes in order to like maintain the structure of society. And so like in this case it could seem that the first stage is meant to prepare people to be productive members of a society that does like, you know, have a system where houses are built and people are fed and
It's
kids
not
are
progressive.
educated and stuff like that. And then and the procreation, like you're saying too. And Kristen was talking about the fact that they passed a law at a certain point in India that people couldn't be renunciants when they were parents at that point, or fathers at that point, because there were too many kids that were just abandoned with,
Right.
you know, with mothers that at that time in India weren't in the position to be the sole supporter of the household. So they made a law that they can't just be renunciates while they're in the process of the householding stage. And so they make these very specific ages as to when these things are supposed to happen. And then, you know, and then afterwards, I don't know exactly what to think of the middle stage, but the final stage where it's saying that the people are supported then if they need food, if they need water or whatever. It's kind of like a social security system.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So.
But yeah, for me is the way it happened with me is just I had a really nice job with my father, and we were in business together. And when he passed away, I was supposed to be taking over the business this year, and then he didn't have a will, and then so the family came in, they wanted the business, and then so I was like, well, you guys can have it, you know. You know, I don't see eye to eye with them, so you guys can have it. So all my savings and everything was in the business, and so now it's like I have nothing. I have absolutely nothing, no money, no savings, nothing. But I'm living, and I've been living for, you know, since then on nothing. The squirrels feed me almost.
And you seem all right.
Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah. I still in communication with my kids and stuff like that, you know. And it's like, but everything's just falling. But yeah, I'm okay. I'm actually happier and I add things.
That's
And I see now, and I'm sitting, I spend a lot of time to myself in closed, small areas, and I see it, and I see that the systems, to me, don't work anymore. That getting the job, and you're spending all your time, and your energy, and money, and to work to pay for this, and then all the spiritual stuff's gone, and then what do you have? Where are you?
Maybe it's time for you to go on a spiritual journey.
Yeah.
Go. There's ashrams and hermitages and all over the world, different
Yeah,
places.
I guess that's my next thing, is find out where they are.
Yeah,
Haven't got out of them.
So you can go off on your own in the woods too. But there are places where there's a support system where you can be fed and have a bed to sleep in,
Right.
and yet you'll be left to your spiritual practices. Yeah, if you moved in that direction, I would suggest trying it. Yeah.
Yeah.
A very deep experience. Yeah.
Awesome.
All good.
Mhm.
So there's a little bit more on that one, but I think you get the general idea of the idea that withdrawing from society will that ultimately we need to do that. Right. First, but we talked too about yoga being union, and it's how you move through your life. So that's an important part of the process, right? Is to move from the pre-adolescent I self-centeredness to realize I'm not the only one, and then we start interacting with other people, and our yoga practices help us interact in a way that makes everyone happier, us and the people around us as well. And then eventually we move past that interaction thing to solo after that. But that's a necessary part of the process too, is the connection first.
I think also when you talk about yoga as being that exploration of what a union is, that when you're talking about renunciating things and letting go of these connections, at the same time it's kind of like letting go of your need to see and have everything right in front of you in arm's reach that you can grab and touch and everything, and rather you understand that the connection still exists even if it's not right immediately present for you.
Right.
Because even if you're not seeing your kids anymore, you've given birth to them, and even if you're not living in society, you've still been you're still a part of the energy that is the whole universe. So
yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly what it is, but it's something more than this. So maybe the ashram needs to come here.
This is in this book, Anastasia, that I'm reading too. She's barely ever left the taiga, and but she is able. Her brain is so developed, and her consciousness is so developed that she is able to tap into anybody, anywhere in the whole world, and be at one with them. At one point, she starts singing for him, and she imitates, but not really imitates. She taps into the energy of this particular singer that he loves, and sings exactly like her, And so it's she calls it the ray. She just constantly meditates, concentrates, and if she wants to be one with Anne-Marie, she taps into Anne-Marie, and then she can send and receive from you, transmit and receive. So yeah, we are so much more connected than we realize.
Yeah.
We just have lost the ability to experience that, which is what these practices are helping us to dust off all that stuff.
I think maybe you can compare it kind of to a romantic relationship, where when it's newer, you want that constant face-to-face connection, and to know what the other person's up to and know what they're thinking, and be reassured that they're thinking of you and that they care for you. And then as the relationship grows, you have more trust to just be okay, we can be apart, and I know that you still love me, and these kind of things. And it's you need less of the immediacy and the less of the reassurance, and you can just trust and feel it without it being right in front of your face all the time.
questions or comments before we together?
What is the name of the book?
The Hatha Yoga Pradipika.
And is it written by or is it?
There's the Nati Yogis. It was written like 2,000 years ago by I guess Swetamarama is the one who they're crediting with this, and then the commentaries by a more modern person. But yeah, it's one of these Nati Yogis from that sect that wrote it.
So how's that in relation to the Yoga Sutras?
It's kind of like an
Companion.
extraction of it. Not that that's exactly what it is, but the Yoga Sutras has 8 limbs, and the right, like the yamas and niyamas are the ethical practices that are the first 2 limbs. So this says we're not going to do that because it struck them as being religious, these ethical practices.
Okay.
So they said we're going to strike that out. So they stick with the middle practices, asana, pranayama, pratyahara as this withdrawal of the senses. And then the upper practices, 3 different levels of meditation, concentration, and samadhi, they say that's out of the scope of this too. Like that's a really higher practice, and what human beings as we know them, that this is more useful to
So they're
human
Protestants.
beings.
Get rid of the Pope.
That's excellent. On that note.
That's my 2 cents.
I love that.
More than 2 cents.
Alright, let's just close the eyes for a moment. We'll tune back in together. The energy of all this animated discussion settle deep into us. This is the study of svadhyaya, the study of self, meaning the higher self. We come to know it through the study of sacred texts, through contemplation and discussions just like we're having. This is sadhana, this is spiritual practice. Take a deep inhale.
Namaste.